When I was about 10, my family moved into a small white house at the end of a quiet street. My mom recently remarried, called it a fresh start, and it seemed perfect. A big yard, tall, leafy trees, and friendly neighbors who waved from their porches. I really wanted to believe it could be a happy home. For the first few weeks, everything was normal. My room was at the end of the hall, small but cozy, with a big window facing the backyard. Opposite my bed stood a closet with an old, heavy wooden door. It creaked every single time you opened it, but I didn't think much of it. At first, one night, I woke up to a sound. It was coming from inside the closet. It wasn't loud, just a soft, muffled rustling, like fabric brushing against other clothes. I stared at the door, trying to tell myself it was nothing. The house settling, maybe a mouse. But then the door shivered, just a tiny, almost imperceptible vibration, as if someone had gently pushed it from the inside. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't dare move a muscle until the sun came up. When I finally worked up the courage to get out of bed, I saw it. The closet door was cracked open. I knew, I was absolutely certain, that I had shut it tight before going to sleep. That was only the beginning. The next few nights, I started hearing a soft tapping on the window right beside my bed. At first, I figured it was just tree branches swaying in the wind. But when I looked outside, there were no trees close enough to even touch the glass. The tapping would continue for minutes at a time, stopping the second I pulled the blanket over my head and starting right back up the moment I peeked out. One night, I finally forced myself to look. Pressed against the glass was a hand, a pale, slender hand, right outside my window. But my room was on the second floor. It was too high for anyone to reach. The hand stayed there, unmoving, for what felt like an eternity before slowly sliding down the glass and disappearing into the night. The next morning, I told my mom. She just laughed, ruffling my hair and telling me I must have been dreaming. My stepdad didn't believe me either. He suggested maybe a large bird had hit the window. But that night, he left the hallway light on. So maybe, just maybe, he didn't feel as safe as he was pretending to be. A few weeks went by, and then my little sister, who was only 5, started talking about the man in the closet. She'd say he whispered to her at night. My mom dismissed it as a child's overactive imagination, but my sister's eyes were wide with genuine terror whenever she mentioned him. One night, she let out a blood-curdling scream. I bolted out of my bed and ran into her room. I found her sobbing, huddled in the corner, pointing at the empty space by her wardrobe. She whimpered that the man had been standing right there, just staring at her. That very same night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hall. They were slow, heavy, deliberate. They stopped right outside my door. I held my breath as the doorknob slowly, silently turned. The door opened just a crack, and in the sliver of light from the hall, I saw a tall, slender shadow leaning in. I squeezed my eyes shut, my whole body rigid, pretending to be fast asleep. When I finally dared to open them again, the door was closed. But in the suffocating silence of my room, I could hear it, its faint, raspy breathing, and it was coming from inside the room with me. The next morning I found them, long, deep scratches carved into the wooden floor right beside my bed, as if someone had dragged their fingernails through the wood with immense force. I showed my mom, but her reaction wasn't what I expected. She got angry. She accused me of doing it myself, of trying to scare everyone. I didn't argue. Deep down, I knew the truth. She didn't want to know. She was too scared to face what was really happening in our new, perfect home. After that, the nights got so much worse. The whispers returned, more frequent, more insistent. Sometimes they seemed to come from my closet, other times from the dark space under my bed. My little sister refused to sleep alone anymore. She'd cry and say the man wouldn't leave her room. Then came a stormy night, the wind howling and rain lashing against the house. I was woken by a soft, grating sound. It was my window, the window I always locked. It was slowly sliding open. I watched in horror as the metal lock twisted all by itself. The curtains billowed inwards, and through the darkness, a figure climbed in. It was tall, impossibly thin, and dressed in what looked like a tattered white gown. Its skin was pale as chalk, its hair was long, black, and stringy, plastered to its face. And its eyes, they were just empty. Black pits. It didn't walk. It floated. Its feet never touched the floor as it drifted towards my bed. It leaned over me, its face just inches from mine. I could feel an unnatural cold radiating from it, its icy breath on my skin. And then, in a voice that sounded like dry leaves scraping on pavement, it whispered my name. I screamed with everything I had. My parents came running, flipping on the light. The room was empty. The window was closed, the lock securely fastened. They told me it was just a nightmare, that the storm had spooked me. But I knew better. I knew what I saw. We lived in that house for 3 more agonizing years. My sister eventually stopped talking about the man in her room. I stopped mentioning the woman who came through my window. We learned to live with the fear, to ignore the whispers and the shadows. We moved away when I was 13. My mom's official reason was that the neighborhood wasn't safe anymore, but I think she just couldn't stand the oppressive feeling of that house another day. Years later, when I was an adult, I asked her if she ever experienced anything strange there.
Ouch.
She hesitated for a long moment, then finally, quietly, said yes. She told me that sometimes she'll wake up in the middle of the night and see a dark shadow of a man standing in her doorway, just watching her and my stepdad sleep. She never told us because she didn't want to scare us even more. She thought it was the spirit of someone who used to live there, but she was never sure. Even now, all these years later, I still have dreams about that house. Sometimes I see the pale woman's face at my window, her black eyes staring in. Other times I hear those slow, heavy footsteps in the hallway, stopping just outside my door. And every single time, right before I wake up in a cold sweat, I hear that same chilling whisper echoing from the dark I never left. Thanks for sticking with me through that. If you have your own stories you'd like to share, drop them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. Stay safe out there. Tonight, I've got a story that'll make you think twice about what is outside your window. This one comes from someone who experienced a truly unsettling presence in their childhood home. So, dim the lights, get cozy, and let's dive into the woman at my window. When I was 10, my family moved into a bigger house after my mom remarried. It was in a quiet neighborhood, surrounded by tall trees, the kind of place that looked peaceful, but never quite felt that way. My new room was at the end of the hall, with 2 big windows overlooking the backyard. During the day, it was perfect, but at night those windows, they made me feel watched. The very first night, I woke up around midnight to a soft sound from my closet. Not loud, just a light rustling, like someone brushing past clothes. I told myself it was just the house settling, but then I saw the closet door tremble slightly. It was subtle, like someone had pushed it from the inside. I froze, too scared to move, until I finally drifted back to sleep. In the morning, the door was cracked open. I knew I'd closed it. That was the start of everything. A few nights later, I started hearing gentle tapping on my window, slow, steady, from the outside. I thought maybe a tree branch was hitting the glass, but when I looked, no trees were close enough. The tapping stopped when I hid under my blanket, but started again the moment I peeked out. One night, I finally saw what was causing it, a faint outline of a hand pressed against the glass. Not a full figure, just the shape, pale and still. It stayed there for several seconds before fading away, like mist on cold glass. The next morning, when I told my mom, she just smiled and said I was probably dreaming. My stepdad even joked that I was watching too many scary movies. But later that night, I noticed he left the hallway light on, something he hadn't done before. A week later, my little brother, who was only 4, started talking about the white lady. He said she visited him at night and stood near his door. Mom told him it was just a dream, but I could tell he was genuinely scared. Then one night, I woke up to thunder and the sound of rain tapping against my window. The power had gone out, leaving the house completely dark. That's when I heard it again, the faint creak of the window frame. I turned toward it and saw something. A shape, tall and pale, just outside the glass. It wasn't clear, almost like fog taking the form of a person. I couldn't see a face, but I could feel it looking at me. I burrowed under my blanket until I fell asleep. When I told my parents the next day, they again dismissed it as imagination. But I noticed my mom started sleeping with her door open after that. Over the next few months, small, unsettling things kept happening. My bedroom door would be open in the morning, even though I distinctly remembered locking it. The window latch would rattle in the wind, even when it was firmly closed. Some nights my brother would call out, saying someone was standing in his doorway. Then one night, I woke up to my name being whispered. It wasn't loud, more like a breath right near my ear. I immediately turned on my bedside lamp, but no one was there. Yet the air felt colder than usual, much colder than the rest of the room. That was the last night I slept with the lights off in that house. We moved out about a year later. My parents said it was for a new job opportunity. But I always wondered if it was because of that house, because of whatever was lingering there. Years later, I finally asked my mom if she ever noticed anything strange. She hesitated for a moment before saying, "Sometimes I thought I saw someone walking past my door. But when I looked, no one was there." Even now, whenever it rains at night, I find myself glancing nervously at the window. And sometimes, only sometimes, I think I see a faint handprint appear on the cold glass, slowly fading away as the storm passes. What do you all think? Have you ever experienced anything like this? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this chilling tale, please give the video a thumbs up, share it with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe for more true horror stories. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there. When I was 8 years old, my world revolved around the cracked pavement and tall maple trees of my quiet neighborhood street. Every afternoon, as soon as school was out, I'd hop on my bike and ride loops around the block. The houses all looked pretty much the same, a line of neat, modest homes all except one. It was an older house, sitting near the corner, distinguished by its long driveway and a massive ancient oak tree that cast a permanent shadow over the front yard. And almost every single day, there was a man standing in that driveway. He always wore the same hat, a simple, classic style, and he'd give me a friendly wave every time I rode past. He never left the driveway, just lingered near the edge where the cement met the sidewalk. He had this calm, kind voice. He'd call out, "Hello there," or "How was school today?" Sometimes he'd even say something like, "That's a nice bike you've got." His presence was reassuring, familiar and friendly landmark on my daily route, even though we were strangers. My mom had drilled into me the rule about never crossing the street alone, so I just wave back from my side of the road and keep pedaling. This became our little ritual for weeks. Our conversations were always brief, shouted across the asphalt. He'd ask about my little brother, or one time he mentioned that my dad had a new car. I never told him these things myself, so I just figured he was one of those observant, friendly older folks who knew everyone's business just by watching the neighborhood go by. He seemed to pay attention to everything. Then one afternoon, he changed it up. That same warm smile, he called out, "Maybe one day we'll race to the corner." I laughed and shouted back, "Maybe," but I didn't slow down. A few days after that, as I rounded the corner onto his street, I noticed the driveway was empty. It felt strange. I slowed my bike, my eyes scanning the spot where he always stood, but there was no one. The front curtains of the house were drawn shut, and the whole yard felt unusually still, eerily quiet. He wasn't there the next day either, or the day after that. I started to wonder if maybe he'd gone on vacation. Then I saw a woman I'd never seen before, out in the yard watering some plants near the porch. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes, like she hadn't been sleeping well. I wanted to ask her where the man with the hat had gone, but I was a shy kid, so I just kept riding past. A few more days went by, and my curiosity finally won. I waited for a moment when my mom wasn't watching from the kitchen window, took a deep breath, and pushed my bike across the street. Up close, the house looked even older. The paint on the porch railings was peeling away in thin strips, and the air had a faint, strange smell of dust and wilting flowers. I stopped my bike at the end of the driveway. The same tired-looking woman was there again, this time trimming some overgrown bushes. She noticed me standing there and offered a polite, weary smile. "Hi there," she said. "Can I help you?" I told her about the man who always stood right there in the driveway, wearing a hat, who waved to me every single afternoon. I told her how nice he was and how he'd always talk to me when I rode by. As I spoke, her faint smile slowly disappeared. She asked me to describe what he looked like. When I told her about his hat and his friendly face, she went completely quiet. She just stared at the spot where I said he always stood. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "That sounds like my husband," she said softly. "He passed away last year." I froze. I didn't understand. I thought maybe she was joking, but the look on her face told me she was serious. She must have seen the confusion in my eyes, because she turned and went inside the house without another word. A moment later, she came back out holding a framed photograph. It held it out for me to see. It was him. It was the same man, the same hat, the same gentle smile. But there was one difference. In the picture, a thin, pale scar ran across his cheek, from his eye to his jaw. The man I saw every day, the one who waved at me, didn't have a scar. A stared at that photo for what felt like an eternity, a cold, not tightening in my stomach. She told me his name was Harold, and that he used to love standing in the driveway every afternoon, just watching the neighborhood. Then she added, almost as if she was talking to herself, he loved talking to the kids on their bikes. I mumbled a thank you and got back on my bike. Riding home, the street felt profoundly different. It was so quiet. Even the sound of the wind and the maple trees seemed to have stopped. The world felt muted and unreal. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him. That hat, that friendly, reassuring smile. The smile I'd seen waving at me every single day for weeks long after he was already gone. For days, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I was mistaken. Maybe the man I saw just looked a lot like her husband. Maybe there was another neighbor I'd never been introduced to who wore the same kind of hat and had the same routine. But deep down, in that place where kids just know things, I knew the truth. A few nights later, something happened that erased all doubt. I woke up suddenly to the sound of a voice calling my name. It was coming from outside, from somewhere near my bedroom window. It was soft, familiar, and undeniably friendly. It was his voice, shot up in bed, my heart pounding against my ribs, just listening. The wind rustled the branches of the tree outside my window, and for a split second, I tried to convince myself it was just the wind. But then I heard it again, said my name, exactly the way he always did when I rode past his driveway. I screamed for my mom. She rushed in, her face full of concern, and told me I must have been having a nightmare. My dad went outside with a flashlight to check the yard, but he came back saying it was empty. There was no one there. The next morning, the driveway across the street looked completely normal again, bright and empty in the morning sunlight. Years passed. That house was sold a few times and new families moved in and out. The old oak tree is still standing, but the driveway is always empty now. I'm grown now, but sometimes when I visit my hometown, I make a point to drive down that street. It's been so many years, but every single time I pass that house, I can't help but glance over at the driveway. Just for a brief, fleeting moment, I swear I can almost see him standing there at the edge of the pavement with that same quiet smile, just watching.